2, 1, go. Oh, so
We're away. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another of the regular monthly meetings of Libertarian Herts here at the Sheppel Social Club, or Centre, more strictly, the Sheppel Centre in Sheppel, Stevenage, Hertfordshire. I'm speaking tonight, Bob Layson, I usually am, and my topic is what it usually is, some people will say. The late, great Steve Berry said that I didn't title each time. It's generally the same subject treated much the same way. And I have to plead guilty to this, or as I think about it, I'm turning over and polishing a new facet of a beautiful gemstone of a piece, or something like that. So where can we start? Well, I can draw it, as I have done before, draw it into some kind of shape by saying, let us begin with Bastiat, the French so-called economists. Some would say, Schumpeter would say, so-called economist. He can't be an economist. There's no mathematics in it. Not that Schumpeter used a lot, I don't think. But still, as Schumpeter said, there isn't even bad theory in it. It's a bit Alice in Wonderlandy, but still, there isn't even bad theory in it. There's just, I don't know, homilies, simplicities, I don't know what really. And I think there's a good deal of theory in the world described by Bastiat, or the alternatives available to people, good and unsound policy, for example, that the complexity doesn't have to be in Bastiat's head. It only has to be in the world. That is the important thing. The important thing there is specialisation of trade, specialisation of studies and insights. All these things can be made use of in the market process by entrepreneurs or producers, if you wish. Every producer is a kind of entrepreneur, unless you have a very restricted meaning to that, of course, which you need not. I mean, some people are hired and don't have any money in the deal, as some investors might, but that's a separate issue. I'm using Bastiat because over the last 4 years, certainly, I've in a sense been chucking things out of the picture, or at least not using certain approaches. Obviously, I don't use facts and figures, save by illustration. I don't think mathematics has any much of a part to play in the understanding of what are called market economies. Though I don't much care for having such a thing. It very often means some kind of interventionist regime. There are simply producers who produce for sale to other people who are also producers, but obviously not producers of exactly the same thing. And they'll be pointless, and it's pretty much pointless unless you're trying to get a full set of something like stamps or coins or something. Then you might swap things with people, but they would have to be different, at least in the mind of the buyer. Like Saints relics or something, or to refer to Elvis Presley's underpants again. There has to be something about it that physically doesn't appear to be. What's the big deal? You're paying extra for something that's, from one point of view, no better than any other pair of a similar kind. So, but there are things that people are willing to have and to pay for, either by labour or worry or the payment of cash. This is all very obvious, one might think. But for me, I came to see that the analysis, especially when you drop the posing as a true scientist. See, true scientists have to have facts and figures and numbers and crunch the numbers and things. If you're not doing that, there's no understanding. There's no correct understanding. Whereas if you see the market process as what it is, although within each producer many a producer will make use of mathematics, maybe sometimes advanced mathematics for all I know. Though not many will be doing that, but some processes may require it. But it's in there. It's not so much in the overall understanding of it or the efficient enough working of the system, not that it's being worked by anybody in particular, to understand it. The complexity is obviously it's in the brain, but we don't, in a sense, use that complexity. There has to be complexity of parts, for us to think simple things and sometimes complicated things. But we don't have to know what's going on in order for it to work, and the same goes for an economy. We don't have to know what all the parts are doing in order for the thing to hang together and to us to gain from making and exchanging within it. So I'm becoming more and more to that kind of position that theory may be for the ones understanding a market economy and advocating a market economy. It's not necessary to have a great deal of data and a great deal of mathematics. In fact, almost none at all. We just have to see what comes of liberty and property and invention and saving and work, skilled, unskilled, and the other kind. And that we can without having any more mathematics or theory than Bastiat. Bastiat was important for seeing the important thing was the private property and the respect for it, and the liberty of the producer and the so-called consumer. I like to stress that consumers are just another kind of producer. They're taking inputs and using them in a way that seems to them the most efficient, or as efficient as they care to be in the circumstances, and they're not making for sale, like a mother will bake an apple pie or something. That's production. It most certainly is production, but it's not production for cash sale or even any other kind of sale, really. Sometimes you do things as favours and you expect favours to be returned. Yes, that's as old as mankind, I should think, but it isn't cash sale in the hope of profit. It's exchange in the hope of profit, having one thing that's more used to you than another. So I like the complexity, but I don't see any need for mathematics. And the same sort of goes for Bastiat. He saw that given security of property, given the existence of private property, given sound enough money, and it was pretty sound when he was alive most of the time, that no more need be done. The saving will be done, the inventing will be done, the separate skills will emerge, some that were always there. Many in the 19th century were being developed and hadn't been known before. So economies, in a sense, run themselves, and therefore need no theory of how best to run them. But even in the 19th century, there were those who thought, well, it's not as simple as that, old chum. And certainly when we get to the middle of the 20th century, along came market failure and of various sorts, and most spectacularly, market failure in the Great Depression. This was something to blame on the free market, the operations of which couldn't just be left. Not let Charles do it, let someone do it. Well, obviously let laissez-faire do it, that was one jibe. In other words, it relied on a kind of magic to make it work. So it's no bad thing that Bastiat had no theory, because he saw that theories will be required, different theories by different producers. I mean, you can call working on a hunch regarding the popularity of a new type of clothing. Is that thinking? I'm sure it's a kind of thinking. It's sorting things out, judging the likelihood of things, being a good judge, being able to follow. The fashion industry is famous for this. They do follow fashion. Some of them start the fashions, but they don't always know they're going to become the fashion. But they may have a head start, but not always then. They're there, but they cannot rapidly scale up and make the things in sufficient number or sufficient quality, and some others will do it for them. But the discovery that this is the next thing, and many a next thing actually isn't the next thing, and some of the next things are things for a great many years. But they're very difficult to predict, but easy to see once the fashion has shifted. So I stress that a great deal of theory and even collection of data is required by various parts of an economy, as we say, though I don't like to think of it that way, as if it were one thing, like a petrol engine or in the parts had to be put together or invented. No, the putting together is just people producing and keeping out of each other's way, pretty much. The old ones are the best. So it isn't necessary to have theory of one sort, at one level, and especially at an overarching level, as in the general theory, decide how to maintain demand so that there can be full employment. Full employment is inevitable. Optimum employment is not inevitable, and it's probably impossible. I mean, you wouldn't know what to be doing, and by the time you thought of it, started doing it, it might be the wrong optimum, an optimum that isn't optimal, as it were. So what is there? Well, there's always coordination, as long as we keep out of each other's way. Now, sometimes you may regard a rival having a better good as getting in the way, but strictly speaking, he's thwarting your purpose, which is to be successful and make profits. But you fail to do this because he simply has made a better product, or a cheaper product, or a more fashionable product. How high can they go? Blah, blah, blah. So, if I throw out equilibrium, and I do, what's left? Well, coordination. That's simply people keeping out of each other's way, or aiding one another, but the point is not thwarting one another directly, or starving one another of vital input. So, to refer to recent matters, the idea that trade has to be organised by governments, that there has to be a deal, a great deal is made of this deal that has to be made. No, all there have to be is a means of transport, or various means of transport, and goods offered at prices that people find quite acceptable, if not tempting. That's how economies hang together, though I don't like to say economies. But there is mutual interdependence. I don't think that can be denied. But none of this needs running. Each producer is sort of trying to run their own little show. As I said, even a mother making an apple pie is a producer, and it's for household consumption, and it's taking inputs, and there are various recipes that can be used. But the fact that it's not for sale doesn't mean it's not a product. So I have equilibrium, not. Equilibrium, no. There's sometimes pausing between actions, but even that is often a kind of activity because you're bored and you think, what should I do now? Oh, I know, I could go and sort out the attic or something. Luckily we haven't got one. That's why I'm never tempted to do that.
The equilibrium, most of all, Keynes.
Yeah.
Because there's no mathematics in Keynes' general theory either.
Oh, yes. Well, he thought there was a...
So on those two things, you've got a lot in common with Keynes. You don't like mathematics. You don't like the equilibrium.
I don't...
Which is a mathematical concept.
So I don't like it. Yes, it is a kind of social physics. That's precisely what it is. They think you have to get the maths in. The most practitioners of the art, and certainly the theory, think there has to be a theory of what next for the economy, which has to be in some sense run by governments or ministers or ministries, and there have to be economic advisors, and there have to be those collecting the data in order to make the better decisions. But Schumpeter saw that given that there was private property, and that's not too difficult to start with if it's been done hundreds of years before you even turned up, so that doesn't take much thought. Sometimes, as with the problem of externalities, poisoning the rivers or such and such and such and such, that can seem to be a problem that not easily dealt with without government, but it can be dealt with if the legal system is sufficiently uncorrupt and cheap and available. Now, the fact that the government stands behind the legal system to a great degree means it very often isn't quick, it isn't cheap, and it isn't always straight. Though it can be not too bad for large portions of the 19th century. And of course, there wasn't the idea that every project had to be given the okay, that you had to get planning permission, a term I despise. Planning it's not the planning permission, it's productive activity permission. It is censorship. No, it's not applied to novels and plays anymore, I don't think. But it certainly is a kind of censorship, especially as you have to submit your plans beforehand to some authority that will permit you to do something. And when the Victorians built a railway, they had to buy the land, yes. And sometimes landlords would hold out, but then they'd be leaned on by the other people who were going to gain from selling their land to the railway company. So in the end, the canals got built, they helped build the railways, especially if you go down to the West Country. You'll see the canal almost hugs the railway. Of course, it was the railway hugging the canal, all the way down to Bristol.
And the roads then follow both.
Yes, that's right. So I don't care for equilibrium, but coordination only in the sense that it's mutual liberty, getting on with it as best you can, as far as your customers and your suppliers will enable you to do this. But I don't care for equilibrium. Coordination is just that. I mean, even that sounds like someone has to be doing it, or it's being done by something. By prices? They coordinating you? They stymie some plans. They encourage some plans to continue and be upped, as it were, in scale, because you're onto a good product or a good range of products. Well, now Bastiat would say, in not coordination so much as harmony. And of course, what does harmony mean? Well, each is working peacefully with what they peacefully obtained, or obtained without theft or violence or intimidation, things of that kind. Oh, pretty good too. And that most producers are making use of other producers' products. That's how it works. Not everybody starts from scratch in an empty room and with no windows or doors. It'd be rather tricky to get very far from there. So, coordination is, if it sounds too fancy, just say mutual independence or even mutual reliance. The point is they don't dictate to each other. They offer their goods for sale and others accept them. Let's come back to trade again. Trade doesn't have to be managed, doesn't have to be organised. Trade is producers wishing to sell to other producers, not producers of the same good, obviously, because they wouldn't need each other's goods. So what is coordination? Coordination is simply peaceful coexistence. You don't get it. You either help each other, or you don't hinder each other, or you indirectly help each other. Most things being made by other things, which are made by other things, which are made by other things. So producers buy from producers of dissimilar products. That's how it works. Unless they're a wholesale retailer, no, obviously of a kind. They are a producer. They put things where you want them to be and offer them for sale. The fact they don't actually make the things, but they make they organise the shops, they load the shelves, they put the prices on, not unimportant, and but the rest takes care of itself. There is no economy that needs to be running, so there's no need for planning at that level. Never equilibrium. It's not desirable and it's not obtainable, pretty much. What? It's sometimes called not knowing what to do with yourself. Bored, stiff, everything tastes... Well, it's in the Bible somewhere. Everything tastes... Salt has lost its savour. Even old pleasures give you no pleasure. Well, I don't know what to do with myself. It's not a pleasant circumstance to be in. I rarely am. I think most people really are. But sometimes, though being stuck in a railway station for hours is pretty close. Right.
Seems like ours anyway.
Yes, trade needs no politics. No, you'd think, I blame the American president for, not alone in this, but for making fashionable the idea that trade has to be organised, has to be deals. Like we have to get a deal from the European Union, otherwise, as if there aren't 1,001 producers out there wanting to sell to people in this country. They want to. What's to stop them? They're not looking for permission. As well, ships and aircraft help, and roads and tunnels, and that helps, but they're all there. They don't have to be produced by government. So trade needs no politics. A good, to become an input, just needs some means of transport. It has to be a good in the eyes of the would-be purchaser, therefore they're willing to purchase it. So it's a good to them, and the transport can be available. So the idea that foreign firms only sell here out of a sense of duty or at the request of the government, no, why would anyone talk in such a way? So over these last 4 years, I have been taking things out of the scope of economics, because most, if you see, there's certainly the business program every day on television or certain things like that. The idea that there should be hands off and goodness gracious, no, and there's got to be policy. What's the Fed doing? What's the Fed doing? The Fed should do this, the Fed should do that, the Fed has done the other. What does that mean? Gee. If anyone can make gold coins of a certain purity and a certain weight, that's all that's required, really. Perhaps there were smaller ones, but of course that can be done by modern alloys or by setting a little bit of gold inside a block of plastic so that the gold doesn't get worn away, even if the plastic does, and therefore it can be identified by machinery rapidly and cheaply. There are ways of doing these things. You can have even gold isn't really gold; it's just like Bitcoin. That could work. I think governments would just jump all over it, or try and do it better, or to guarantee it. But still, the complexity is not in having a currency. Well, all right, there'll be a currency, but currency won't do the washing up. It never did. The idea there's something vital that if you can only tweak it here, tweak it there, increase it. Oh yes, increasingly like. Well, it's a virtue ever since Keynes. It's demand. It's demand. That's what it is. You can print it like Billy. Don't even have to print it. You just have to announce that this is the reserve of a bank, or that is added to the reserves. I don't say it's madness, but these people are horribly sane in a way, but they just don't consider that they might not be right. See, I beseech you in the bowels of Christ, consider it not possible you be mistaken. Was that Cromwell?
Yes.
It was Cromwell.
He says Parliament, yeah. And then he dismissed them. He sacked Parliament. Yeah.
And even if you're not, you're out of here. What then? So Bastiat is my hero here, because he saw that once there was security of property, freedom of contract, and people stuck with it, they did what they ought, and they respected each other's property, which most people do. You see how easy it is to lob a stone through a window at night? But how often does it happen? There was the case, Professor Phillips Griffiths, I think, pointed it out. It may be true that there was an American in the 19th century. He used to like firing his rifle at the window panes of passing railway carriages. And it never struck him that, well, it might strike some people behind the window for a start. And he thought, I just like the sound it makes, or the look of it, and the good practice of my rifle shooting. Yeah, but no, there are repercussions, side of externalities, but most of the worst externalities are externalities of activist government, giving us the right currency or the right volume of currency or the right this, that, and the right education system, But Bastiat saw that the important thing that we respected each other's property and persons, which most people do. It's not a difficult thing. It doesn't have to be organised. Well, sadly, the opposite is organised. It's called creating a party and having a policy of taxing or prohibiting or compelling or requiring and so on, whilst they're running an economy. So economies need no theory of how best to run them and don't need to be run anyway. Let us finish.
Then anything that science studies is not run by the science that studies it.
That's true.
So economics is no different there from You know, from biology, for example, we study the bee, the bumblebee. Our understanding of the bumblebee is what enables the bumblebee to. And the same with almost anything, you know. The whole of physics, the whole of chemistry. The subject matter that is studying doesn't depend upon the actual science. The science is just passively trying to understand what's external to it, which is the phenomenon. So in this sense, economics is no different from anything else.
Except that it wanted to pin the blame on the free market.
Oh yeah, well I think,
And it was found guilty by Keynes. He also thought that governmental regimes could be at fault for not listening to him for a start, or for doing certain things, or going back on gold after the Great War. But, yeah, you might say this or that, but apart from that, even he would think that there would be laissez-faire of a kind. You want commercial freedom to build up businesses, run them down, move them.
Yeah, I think they are. I think the whole of politics is a bit confused about economics. You know, the idea that we've got to know, or we know better now. It's a bit like medicine, really. Medicine isn't a science, really. It's kind of like a technology. But then you have biology, which contributes to medicine, chemistry that contributes to medicine, and so on. But medicine itself is a sort of technology. Now, I suppose political economy, as it then was, it's a sort of technology. Whereas when old Marshall tried to call it economics, which I think it was very good, that was when forget about the politics of it, let's see how it works. And of course, his mathematics was in an appendix as well. Although both Keynes and Marx were mathematicians by training, their economics was devoid of mathematics, and Marshall put his mathematics in an appendix at the end of the book.
Good man. Sadly, most people do not agree with me and others that the important thing is the existence of acknowledged private property, which luckily we already have, and it's mostly acknowledged, except that it's now even more acknowledged and encouraged that the state should grab hold of some of it in order to do virtuous things, like have a health service or an employment policy or military intervention in other countries, for example, which just have to be done. Of course, I do not agree that where there is liberty and respect for one another, there need not be Navy, Army and Air Force. There need not be a plan. There need not be organised trade. There need not be deals worked via other governments to ensure that goods are regarded as good, transports. No, it's not necessary in the slightest. Well, what about quality? What about... well, that's how certain firms made their name. Oh, people are told... It's said that people want things to be reliable. They want things to be... well, they do, yes, which is precisely why footwear firms don't only make left-footed shoes, and they make different sizes, and they don't ask the customer to come to the factory. It's not by chance that there are firms that specialise in transporting, in advertising, in displaying, in selling, in pricing. What to imagine that this trade has to be organised? No, not in the slightest. Keep out of the way. It's laissez-faire, laissez-passer. That's all that is required. I think we can end there. Abruptly. But of course, we should continue with the question, please.
Yes. One thing that was pointed out to me quite some years ago now in business economics was that the idea of market equilibrium was a false way of looking at it, because it does lead to the idea that there's some perfectibility. That if you achieve some kind of harmony, then you've perfected the market in some way. Of course, my way of thinking, that might lead to stasis, not to...
Well, there's that, but by...
improvement. But the other thing, the thing was to think of it as a constant tension there's market tension all the time, and there isn't a perfect state of affairs.
Oh, there isn't a place where it really settles like a scale after you've jumped onto it,
That's why
and then it won't change.
That's why I was told to reject that idea.
Well, in a sense, quite rightly. But the point that Bastiat makes, and I'm trying to make too, is that harmony does not require utter predictability or lack of change or anything like that. It means